In 1587, 115 English colonists landed on Roanoke Island. Men, women, children, entire families seeking a new life in the Americas. 3 years later, they were gone. Not dead, not captured, simply gone. Every house carefully dismantled, every possession methodically removed. No bodies, no graves, no signs of violence or panic, just empty land where a thriving settlement once stood. And carved into a wooden post, one word: CROATOAN. Here's what makes this mystery different from every other unsolved disappearance you've heard about. We actually know where they went. We have archaeological evidence, DNA traces in living descendants, historical documents that point to a clear answer. And yet, for 400 years, we've called them the Lost Colony. Why? Because the truth they left behind, the choice they made, was so unthinkable to the people who discovered their absence that they refused to see it. They invented elaborate theories of massacre, disease, storms, anything but accept what the evidence plainly showed. Tonight, we're going to walk through what really happened, not with speculation or fantasy, but with the archaeological fragments, the documented facts, and the silent testimony of those who carry the colonists' blood in their veins today. This is the story of 115 people who didn't vanish. They transformed. Welcome to the Relic Compendium. This is the story of Roanoke. To understand what happened at Roanoke, we must first understand why anyone ventured there at all. It is the year 1583. England, under the rule of Queen Elizabeth I, is a nation on the rise, but also a nation feeling constrained. Spain dominates the New World. Spanish galleons return laden with gold and silver from their colonies in Central and South America. Spain's wealth is staggering, and with it comes military and political power that threatens England's sovereignty. Sir Walter Raleigh, a favorite of the Queen, sees an opportunity. A bold, ambitious courtier with a taste for adventure and a mind for strategy, Raleigh proposes something audacious. England will establish its own foothold in the New World, not in the Spanish-controlled South, but further north, in the region the English call Virginia, named in honor of Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. Raleigh's vision is not simply about wealth, though he certainly hopes for that.
It is about creating a base from which English privateers can raid Spanish treasure fleets. It is about securing resources, timber, furs, and perhaps even a route to the Pacific. And it is about legacy. Raleigh wants to be remembered as the man who planted England's flag in the Americas. But Raleigh himself never sets foot in Virginia. Instead, he sends others, and the story truly begins in 1584. In April of 1584, 2 ships leave England under the command of Philip Amatus and Arthur Barlow. Their mission is reconnaissance. Find a suitable location. Make contact with the native people. Assess the land's potential. By July, they arrive along the outer banks of present-day North Carolina. It is a landscape unlike anything the English have seen. Barrier islands stretch for miles, sheltering shallow sounds and marshes teeming with life. The land is green and rich. Forests thick with oak, cedar, and pine extend inland as far as the eye can see. And then they meet the people. The indigenous inhabitants of this region are Algonquian-speaking tribes. They have lived here for thousands of years, cultivating crops, fishing the abundant waters, and maintaining complex political relationships between their various towns and chiefdoms. The English are strangers, yes,
but not the first Europeans these people have encountered. Spanish explorers have been probing these coasts for decades. The initial meeting is cautious but cordial. Two men, in particular, will become crucial to the unfolding story: Manteo and Wanchese. Manteo is from the CROATOAN people, who live on what is now Hatteras Island. He is diplomatic, curious, and willing to engage with these foreign newcomers. Wanchese, on the other hand, is from Roanoke Island and is far more skeptical of English intentions.
Both men agree to sail back to England with Amadas and Barlow. It is a decision that will tie their fates and the fates of their people to the English forever. When the ships return to England in September, Manteo and Wanchese become sensations. They are presented at court. They help Thomas Harriot, a mathematician and ethnographer, learn about the Algonquian language and culture, and their presence lends legitimacy to Raleigh's plans. The reports from the expedition are glowing. The land is fertile. The people are friendly. The possibilities are endless. Queen Elizabeth grants Raleigh a charter. He is authorized to establish a colony. The race to settle Virginia has begun. In April 1585, a fleet of 7 ships departs England. This is no small reconnaissance mission. This is a colonization effort, led by Sir Richard Grenville. Among the 600 men aboard are soldiers, scientists, and skilled laborers. Thomas Harriot is there to study the land and its people. John White, a talented artist, is there to document everything he sees. By late summer, they arrive at Roanoke Island. A fort is constructed. Relations with the local Secatan and Roanoke tribes are initially positive. Manteo serves as an interpreter and intermediary. John White's watercolors from this period show a world of careful observation. Native villages with their longhouses, agricultural fields of corn and beans, religious ceremonies, and the daily rhythms of indigenous life. But problems arise quickly. The English are not farmers. Many of them are soldiers or gentlemen unaccustomed to hard labor. The supplies they brought are insufficient, and they are dependent on trade with the indigenous people for food. Misunderstandings occur. Suspicions grow on both sides. In one incident, an English silver cup goes missing. Grenville, convinced it was stolen by the people of the Aquascagok village, orders the entire town burned in retaliation. It is a catastrophic overreaction, one that shatters any trust that had been building. When Grenville returns to England for more supplies, he leaves behind 107 men under the command of Ralph Lane. Their instructions are simple: hold the fort, maintain relations with the natives, and search for gold or other valuable resources. But Lane is not a diplomat. He is a military man, and his leadership is harsh and paranoid. Relations with the indigenous people deteriorate further. The Roanoke tribe, led by Chief Wingina, becomes increasingly hostile. Food becomes scarce. The colony teeters on the edge of survival. In June 1586, Sir Francis Drake arrives with a fleet, fresh from raiding Spanish settlements in the Caribbean. He offers Lane and his men a way out. Exhausted, hungry, and demoralized, they accept. The first Roanoke colony is abandoned after less than a year. When Grenville returns shortly after with supplies, he finds the fort deserted. He leaves 15 men behind to hold the claim and returns to England once again. Those 15 men are never seen again. Despite the failures, Raleigh is undeterred. In 1587, he organizes a new expedition. This time, the plan is different.
This will not be a military outpost manned by soldiers. This will be a true colony. Families, women, children, people willing to build lives in the new world. John White is appointed governor. He has seen Roanoke before. He knows the land, has documented its beauty, and believes in its potential.
Among the 115 colonists are his daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Ananias Dare. In May 1587, they set sail. But from the very beginning, nothing goes according to plan. The plan had been to stop briefly at Roanoke Island to check on the 15 men Grenville had left behind, then continue north to the Chesapeake Bay, where the land was said to be more fertile and the indigenous people less hostile. But the ship's pilot, Simon Fernandez, refuses to take them any further. Whether out of eagerness to return to privateering or simple insubordination, he insists the colonists disembark at Roanoke. John White has no choice. In late July 1587, 115 men, women, and children land on Roanoke Island. They find the fort that Ralph Lane's men had built, but it is overgrown, partially dismantled, and empty. Of Grenville's 15 men, there is no trace. One skeleton is found nearby, but the circumstances of death are unclear. The others have simply vanished. It is an ominous beginning. The colonists set to work rebuilding. Homes are repaired, fields are cleared. Manteo, who has returned with the English for a third time, helps facilitate cautious contact with his people, the CROATOAN. But relations with other tribes remain strained, even hostile. On August 18th, 1587, something remarkable happens. Eleanor Dare gives birth to a daughter. They name her Virginia, the first English child born in the Americas. It is a moment of hope, a symbol that this colony might endure, might grow into something lasting. But hope is fragile. Less than 2 weeks after Virginia Dare's birth, tragedy strikes. George Howe, one of the colonists, wanders away from the settlement to catch crabs in the shallow waters. He is found later, dead, his body pierced by 16 arrows. The attack is swift, brutal, and unmistakable in its message. The English are not welcome. John White organizes a retaliatory raid. Guided by Manteo, they attack what they believe is a hostile Roanoke village under cover of darkness. But in the chaos and confusion, they realize too late that they have attacked CROATOAN people, Manteo's own tribe, who had been scavenging abandoned Roanoke homes. One man is killed. The trust that Manteo has worked so hard to build is nearly destroyed. The colony is isolated now, surrounded by hostility and misunderstanding, and their supplies are running desperately low. The colonists hold a meeting. The decision is made. Someone must return to England to secure more supplies and reinforcements. But who? The choice falls to John White. He is the governor, yes, but more importantly, he is the one with the connections. He knows Raleigh. He can advocate for the colony's needs. But White is reluctant. He is a grandfather now. His daughter and infant granddaughter are here. Leaving them feels like abandonment. But there is no other option. On August 27th, just 9 days after Virginia Dare's birth, John White boards a ship and departs for England. Before he leaves, White and the colonists agree on a plan. If they are forced to abandon Roanoke, they will carve the name of their destination into a tree or post. If they leave under duress or in danger, they will add a Maltese cross above the name. It is a simple code, one they all understand. White expects to return within months, but fate, politics, and war have other plans. When John White arrives back in England in November 1587, he finds a nation on the brink of war. Spain,
enraged by English privateering and Elizabeth's support for Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, is assembling the largest naval fleet the world has ever seen, the Spanish Armada. Every available English ship is being pressed into defensive service. White tries desperately to organize a relief mission.
He secures 2 small ships in April 1588, but the captains are more interested in hunting French vessels for profit. After a disastrous engagement, the ships return to England, and White is left empty-handed. Then, in July 1588, the Spanish Armada arrives. 130 warships bearing down on England's coast. It is a battle for survival. The English fleet, though smaller, is faster and more maneuverable. Aided by fierce storms, they manage to scatter and decimate the Armada in one of history's most dramatic naval victories. But the war is not over. For the next 2 years, England remains on high alert. Every ship, every sailor, every resource is committed to defense and retaliation. John White's colonists are stranded, thousands of miles away, with no supplies and no reinforcements. And all the while, the land they are trying to survive in is caught in the grip of one of the worst droughts in 800 years. Modern scientists, analyzing tree rings from ancient bald cypress trees in the region, have discovered something chilling. From 1587 to 1589, the area experienced what is called a megadrought, the most severe dry period in nearly 8 centuries. Think about what that means. Streams dry up, wells run shallow, crops wither in the fields. Game animals migrate away in search of water. For the indigenous people who have lived in this land for generations, it is a crisis that requires every bit of their accumulated knowledge to survive. For the English colonists, who are still learning the land and dependent on trade for food, it is a catastrophe. Even if relations with the surrounding tribes had been perfect, sharing scarce resources during a drought is nearly impossible. And relations were far from perfect. The memory of burned villages and broken trust lingered. The death of George Howe remained unavenged in the eyes of some tribes. The colonists are alone, hungry, and surrounded by a landscape that cannot sustain them. We don't know exactly when the decision was made. We don't know if it was a desperate evacuation or an orderly planned migration. But at some point between August 1587 and August 1590, the colonists of Roanoke Island made a choice. They left. What we do know, from what John White found upon his return, is that the colonists did not flee in panic. The fort was not ransacked. The homes were not burned. Instead, they were carefully dismantled. This is crucial. When people leave in terror, when they are fleeing disease, starvation, or an attacking enemy, they leave things behind. They grab what they can carry and run. But the evidence suggests the Roanoke colonists took their time. They removed the wooden planks from their houses. They dug up the fort's palisade fence and carried it with them. These are not the actions of people running for their lives. These are the actions of people who know they are not coming back and who intend to use every scrap of material they have for their next home. Archaeological evidence supports this. The settlement site shows no signs of violence. There are no mass graves, no scorch marks from fire, no scattered belongings left in haste. The colonists left Roanoke Island deliberately. But where did they go? For years, historians and archaeologists have debated this question. If we map out the possibilities, a few locations stand out. One option: north to the Chesapeake Bay. This had been the original plan, after all. The Chesapeake region offered better farmland, more navigable rivers, and potentially friendlier tribes. Some early 17th century reports from the Jamestown settlers, who arrived in 1607,
mention hearing stories from indigenous people about Europeans living inland.
Could these have been Roanoke survivors or their descendants? Another option, west, into the interior of present-day North Carolina. In 2012, researchers analyzing one of John White's maps discovered hidden markings beneath a patch that had been glued over a section of the map. Using modern imaging technology, they revealed what White had hidden: a small fort symbol, about 50 miles inland. Could this have been a planned backup location? Archaeological excavations at what is now called Site X have uncovered English artifacts from the late 16th century, pottery shards, gun parts, and other items, mixed with Native American materials. This suggests contact and possibly cohabitation. But the evidence is still incomplete, and the full story of Site X remains under investigation. But there is a third possibility, one that has the most direct evidence, one that the colonists themselves pointed to. South, to CROATOAN Island. It is August 1590. Nearly 3 full years have passed since John White last saw his family. He stands on the deck of a ship anchored off the coast of Roanoke Island, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The journey back has been torturous. Finally freed from England's wartime restrictions, White convinced a privateering fleet to make a detour to Roanoke. But even this return voyage has been plagued with problems. Storms delayed them. 2 men drowned in rough surf while attempting to row ashore. Now, as White finally sets foot on the island, a profound silence greets him. He and his men make their way toward the settlement. They call out. Their voices echo across the empty landscape. No one answers. As they approach the palisade, they see it. CROATOAN. The letters are carved deep into a wooden post, clear and unmistakable. White's heart leaps. This is not a random word. This is the signal they agreed upon. His daughter, his granddaughter, the colonists, they went to CROATOAN Island to be with Manteo's people. And there is no Maltese cross, no sign of distress. They left safely, deliberately. White searches the settlement more thoroughly. He finds another carving, simpler this time, on a tree. C-R-O. Possibly the beginning of the same message, carved and then abandoned before completion. The houses are gone, as he expected, but he finds something else. 5 iron chests have been dug up and broken open. White recognizes one of them as his own. Inside had been books, maps, and his paintings, irreplaceable records of his first visits to Virginia. Now they are ruined, scattered, rotted by rain and neglect. Who dug them up? Why? Were they excavated by the colonists before they left, taking what was valuable and leaving what was too damaged to carry? Or did someone else find them after the departure? White doesn't know, but he believes he knows where his people are. CROATOAN Island is only 50 miles south, a short journey. He makes plans to sail there immediately. But the storms that have plagued this voyage are not finished. The weather worsens. The ships lose anchors in the rough seas. Supplies are running low, and the privateering fleet is eager to return to raiding Spanish ships. The captain gives White a choice. Return to England now, or be abandoned here. Heartbroken, White has no choice. He leaves, promising himself he will return. He never does. John White dies in Ireland around 1593, never knowing what became of his family. The word CROATOAN is all that remains. So who were the CROATOAN, and why would the colonists go there? The CROATOAN people lived on what is now called Hatteras Island, a thin barrier island about 50 miles south of Roanoke. Today, it is a peaceful stretch of land, known for its beaches and Cape Hatteras lighthouse. In the 16th century, it was home to a thriving Algonquian community. Manteo was CROATOAN, and Manteo,
unlike many other indigenous leaders the English encountered, remained friendly and loyal throughout the entire troubled history of Roanoke.
When tensions exploded with other tribes, Manteo stood by the English. In 1587, as a reward for his loyalty, Walter Raleigh granted Manteo the title Lord of Roanoke and Dasamungapunka, making him the first Native American to be given an English noble title. If the colonists were going to seek refuge anywhere, CROATOAN made sense. It was Manteo's home. His people had not been attacked or betrayed by the English, and in a time of drought and starvation, aligning with a community that knew the land intimately would have been a matter of survival. But this raises an important question. What does going to CROATOAN actually mean? Does it mean the colonists lived separately on the island, maintaining their English identity and waiting for rescue? Or does it mean something deeper, that they integrated, intermarried, and became part of CROATOAN society? For much of history, this second possibility was dismissed. The idea that English colonists would willingly assimilate into Native American culture was seen as shameful, a failure. But modern archaeology has begun to tell a different story. For decades, the only traces of the lost colony were the carvings John White found and the stories passed down through generations. But in recent years, a remarkable series of archaeological discoveries has emerged from Hatteras Island. Beginning in the 1990s, archaeologists began finding artifacts that didn't belong, small fragments of European pottery, pieces of metal, items that, when tested, dated to the late 16th century. Then, in the early 2000s, more significant finds began to appear. Among them, a broken English rapier hilt, the handle of a weapon, unmistakably European, buried in a layer of soil that placed it right around the time of the lost colony. But the most compelling evidence came in the form of something called hammer scale. Hammer scale is a byproduct of blacksmithing. When a blacksmith heats iron and hammers it, tiny flakes of metal fall away. These flakes are too small to recycle, and they accumulate in the soil around a forge. Hammer scale is like a fingerprint. It doesn't occur naturally, and it doesn't move far from where it was created. Archaeologists found hammer scale on Hatteras Island in contexts that date to the late 1500s. This means someone was working iron there, using English techniques, during the exact period when the lost colony would have been relocating. The indigenous people of this region did not smelt or forge iron. They had no tradition of blacksmithing. The presence of hammer scale is direct evidence of English metalworking technology at CROATOAN during the time of the lost colony. But perhaps most striking is where these artifacts were found. They weren't in a separate, isolated English settlement. They were mixed in with Native American pottery, tools, and dwelling sites. The evidence suggests cohabitation, two cultures living together, sharing space, sharing resources. This is not the story of colonists huddled in a desperate camp, waiting for rescue that never came. This is the story of integration. Imagine you are one of the Roanoke colonists in late 1587 or early 1588. You have been on this island for over a year. Supplies are gone. The drought has made farming nearly impossible. Relations with nearby tribes are hostile. Your governor has not returned. And with each passing month, the likelihood of rescue grows dimmer. But you have one ally, Manteo. He has been your guide, your interpreter, your bridge to this unfamiliar world. And now he offers you a choice. Come to CROATOAN, live with my people. We will share what we have. You will be safe. What would you do? For families with small children, the decision is easy. Survival comes first.
You dismantle your homes, gather your tools, and make the journey south. When you arrive, the CROATOAN welcome you, not out of charity alone, but because Manteo has advocated for you, and perhaps because your presence offers something valuable. You have metal tools. You understand English shipbuilding. You can repair iron implements. You are not guests. You are refugees becoming members of a new community. At first, you might try to maintain your Englishness. You keep your language, your customs, your clothing. But as months turn into years, the boundaries blur. Intermarriage happens. Children are born who are both English and CROATOAN.
The younger generation, like Virginia Dare, grow up learning Algonquian as fluently as English. They learn to fish with weirs, to hunt with bows, to cultivate the land as the CROATOAN have for centuries. Within a generation, the distinction fades. There is no lost colony anymore. There are simply people living on Hatteras Island, carrying the blood and memory of both worlds. This is assimilation, and it is the most likely fate of the Roanoke colonists. There is another piece to this story, one that extends far beyond the 16th century. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European settlers moving into the interior of North Carolina encountered something unusual. A group of people who did not fit neatly into the racial categories of the time. They spoke English as their first language. Many had European surnames like Dare, Cooper, and White, names that had belonged to Roanoke colonists. Some had gray eyes, a rare trait among Native Americans. These people called themselves CROATOAN, and later Lumbee. They insisted they were the descendants of indigenous tribes in the lost colony of Roanoke. For a long time, their claims were dismissed, but modern genetic studies have begun to tell a different story. DNA analysis of Lumbee people has revealed markers consistent with both Native American and European ancestry. Some individuals carry mitochondrial DNA haplogroups that are common in England, but extremely rare among indigenous populations. This doesn't prove definitively that the Lumbee are descended from the lost colony. DNA evidence is complex and migration patterns are tangled. But it does suggest that the story the Lumbee have been telling for centuries may have a foundation in historical fact. If the Roanoke colonists assimilated into CROATOAN society, then their descendants didn't disappear. They survived. They adapted. They became the Lumbee, carrying forward a unique heritage that blends two worlds. Of course, assimilation at CROATOAN is not the only theory about what happened to the lost colony. Over the centuries, many alternative explanations have emerged. Let's examine some of them. The Spanish attack theory. In the late 16th century, Spain was England's mortal enemy. Spanish forces regularly raided English settlements in the Caribbean. Could Spanish soldiers have discovered Roanoke and wiped out the colonists? It's possible. Spanish records from the period mention English activity along the North Carolina coast, and there was certainly motive. Spain wanted to eliminate any English foothold in what they considered their territory. But there is no hard evidence. No Spanish records boast of destroying Roanoke. And John White found no signs of battle. No bodies, no weapons, no burned structures. If the Spanish had attacked, they would likely have left evidence. The orderly dismantling of the settlement doesn't match the aftermath of a military raid. The famine and disease theory. Could the colonists have simply succumbed to starvation or epidemic disease during the drought years? Again, it's possible. The drought was severe, and European diseases could have ravaged a population already weakened by malnutrition. But this theory has significant problems. If the colony had died en masse, John White would have found graves or remains. Instead, he found an empty but intact settlement, with clear signs that people left deliberately. Famine and disease may have contributed to the colonists' decision to leave Roanoke, but they don't explain the disappearance itself. The hurricane theory. Some have suggested that a massive storm swept through the Outer Banks, destroying the colony and scattering or drowning the inhabitants. The Outer Banks are indeed vulnerable to hurricanes, but again, this doesn't match the evidence. A hurricane would leave destruction in its wake: splintered wood, debris fields, bodies washed up on shore. White found none of these. The settlement looked dismantled, not destroyed. The Dare Stones. And then there are the Dare Stones, one of the most controversial pieces of evidence in the entire mystery.
In 1937, a tourist in North Carolina discovered a large stone with a carved inscription. It claimed to be a message from Eleanor Dare, John White's daughter. According to the stone, most of the colonists had died from disease and attacks, and only 7 had survived, fleeing inland. The stone caused a sensation. Soon dozens more Dare Stones appeared, each telling a continuation of Eleanor's story. But historians quickly grew suspicious.
The language was inconsistent. The details contradicted known facts, and the sheer number of stones seemed implausible. Would Eleanor really have carved her life story onto 48 separate rocks? By the early 1940s, most scholars concluded that the Dare Stones, except possibly the first one, were forgeries, an elaborate hoax. Yet the first stone remains a subject of debate. Some believe it could be genuine. Others dismiss it as the beginning of a con.
The truth is, we may never know.
But the Dare Stones remind us of something important. The lost colony has captured imaginations for so long. The people have been willing to fabricate evidence just to be part of the story.
So why do most modern historians and archaeologists favor the assimilation theory over these alternatives?
Because it fits the evidence. The CROATOAN carving tells us where the colonists intended to go. The absence of a Maltese cross tells us they left safely, not under attack. The archaeological finds on Hatteras Island, the pottery, the metalwork, the hammer scale, tell us that English people were living there during the right time period.
And the Lumbee oral traditions tell us
That the story of integration has been passed down for generations. Assimilation also makes sense within the broader context of colonial history. When resources are scarce and survival is uncertain, cultural boundaries become less important. What matters is finding food, shelter, and safety. The colonists had those things within reach, if they were willing to join Manteo's people. This doesn't mean the story is completely solved. We still don't know the exact timeline. We don't know if all 115 colonists went to CROATOAN, or if some split off and went to other locations like Site X. We don't know how long they maintained a distinct English identity before fully integrating. But the core of the mystery, what happened to them, seems increasingly clear. They did not vanish. They did not die en masse. They moved, adapted, and became part of a new community. The lost colony was never truly lost. It simply changed.
For more than 4 centuries, the lost colony of Roanoke has held a unique place in American imagination. It is the nation's first unsolved mystery, a ghost story written into the founding narrative. But why does this story endure? Why do we still care about 115 people who disappeared over 400 years ago? Part of the answer lies in the nature of the mystery itself. The clues are tantalizing but incomplete.
The CROATOAN carving is clear enough to point us in a direction, but vague enough to leave room for interpretation. The lack of bodies, of a clear disaster, of any definitive end,
creates a vacuum that our imaginations rush to fill. We want to believe that mysteries can be solved. We want to believe that if we look hard enough, dig deep enough, analyze carefully enough, we will find the truth.
Roanoke offers us that hope. Every few years, a new discovery emerges. An artifact, a reanalysis of old maps, a genetic study, and the story inches closer to resolution. But it never quite gets there. There is also something deeply human about the story. These were not soldiers on a military campaign. They were families. There were children. A baby, born in a strange land, who might have been the first link between two worlds.
When we think about the lost colony, we think about Eleanor Dare holding her infant daughter, wondering if help would ever come. We think about the choices those families had to make, the compromises required to survive. And in some ways, the story of Roanoke is the story of America itself. It is about people from different worlds colliding, sometimes violently, sometimes cooperatively. It is about adaptation and loss, about the blending of cultures and the erasure of boundaries. The colonists may have lost their Englishness, but they gained something else, a place in a new world, a lineage that continues to this day.
The Roanoke mystery also teaches us about the limitations and possibilities of historical investigation. For centuries, historians relied solely on written records. John White's accounts, Thomas Harriot's notes, and scattered references in English documents were all we had. This led to a narrative focused on European perspectives, European failures, and European disappearances. The indigenous people of the region were often treated as background figures, obstacles to English ambitions rather than active participants with their own agency and stories. Modern archaeology has changed that. By looking at material culture, the things people made, used, and left behind, we can piece together narratives that don't rely on written sources. The hammer scale on Hatteras tells a story that no English document ever recorded. The mixed artifact layers reveal interactions that no colonist thought to write down. And oral traditions, long dismissed as unreliable, are being taken seriously again. The Lumbee have insisted for generations that they are descended from the lost colony. DNA studies are beginning to support that claim. What does it mean when the mystery has been solved in the memories of the descendants, but not in the archives of historians?
It means that history is not just written, it is lived. And sometimes the answers we seek are not hidden in the past. They are walking among us, carried forward in the bodies and stories of living people.
Even with all we have learned, questions remain. Did all 115 colonists go to CROATOAN, or did they split into multiple groups? The evidence from Site X suggests that some may have headed inland. Were these groups acting together, or did disagreements lead to separation? How long did the colonists maintain their English identity? Did Eleanor Dare teach Virginia to read and write?
Did the families hold on to their Christian faith, or did they adopt Croatoan spiritual practices? Did they ever hope for rescue, or did they accept their new lives completely? And what of John White? Did he ever suspect what his people had done, that they had not been slaughtered or destroyed, but had instead chosen to blend into another world? Would he have understood that choice? Or would he have seen it as a kind of death?
We will likely never know these answers with certainty.
The passage of time, the loss of records, and the fragility of evidence ensure that some aspects of the story will remain forever out of reach. But that is not a failure. That is the nature of history. We piece together what we can from the fragments that survive. We make educated guesses based on evidence and probability.
And we accept that some things, no matter how much we wish otherwise, are simply unknowable.
In the end, the lost colony of Roanoke is not a story of vanishing. It is a story of transformation, The colonists did not disappear into the mists of history. They walked 50 miles south, carrying their tools and their hopes, and they joined a people who offered them refuge. They built new homes, learned new skills, and watched their children grow up in a world that was neither fully English nor fully CROATOAN, but something in between. In time, they became ancestors. Their blood runs through descendants who still live in North Carolina today. Their story, once lost to history, is now being reclaimed, not as a mystery, but as a testament to adaptation, survival, and the resilience of human connection. CROATOAN was not a cry for help. It was a signpost, a message left behind for anyone who cared to follow. And now, centuries later, we finally have. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. The silent colony of Roanoke is just one entry in the compendium of history's great mysteries. Each week, we will open another page, uncover another forgotten story, and explore the questions that have lingered in the margins of time. If you found this story compelling, share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe happened to the colonists? Subscribe to the Relic Compendium. Until next time, rest well. Good night.